My first recollection of Jesus really comes from my grandmother, and she was always an inspiration to me, even as a very young child, because I watched her read the Bible, and I watched her sit there in the Old Testament and study the genealogy of the Old Testament, and it just inspired me because she was so knowledgeable and a layperson, and so it taught me that a layperson can be knowledgeable about the Bible. Well, I grew up Lutheran, and my father was chairman of the congregation, and my mother always taught Sunday school. She always taught sixth grade Sunday school for, I guess, 20 years. And so they were a great example of leadership, both for young people and adults, and it just inspires me, to know that they had a strong faith story, and they shared that with me. I would even go as far as to say it was a requirement, and that there just was not a Sunday that we didn't go to church. Even when we traveled, this is kind of funny because we went to visit churches and wherever we traveled. Even if it was not Lutheran, we would at least visit a church if there was no other Lutheran denomination church. So that was just kind of a requirement of that's what you did on Sunday. Confirmation class and instruction for me was a 3-year program at my church. It was every Saturday morning for 3 years. And one of the funny parts about that is my parents did bribe me slightly because I got to go have Jack in the Box tacos afterwards. But I really enjoyed it because I enjoyed being with my friends. And our pastor really was engaging, and so it was a really fun experience, really. We went very strongly into memorization of so many things, and it's something that as an adult I really appreciate that I did memorize those things. I would say really there's probably 3 things that would just jump out of my memory, and the first would be the fact that I was a youth minister of St. Luke's Lutheran Church. The second would be that I was Director of Children and Family at Lovers Lane Methodist Church. And the third would be the trips that I've taken with Prince of Peace to Peru. I've made several trips to Peru, and having the opportunity to go and evangelize in Peru and also just really share God with my children in that they have also gone. My son is now a Lutheran minister, and his faith walk was shaped by a mission trip that he and I took to Nicaragua. So I think that those things are the things that just stand out in my memory in terms of the important things about it. And I think the reason that the Peru trips were so important to me was that not so much that I necessarily brought people to Christ, but so much is that I encouraged people in their faith walk in Peru. And I think that that was very important, as well as getting to have the interaction with the young people as well. A faith story for me is not merely important for my family, but I think it's just as important to me for my friends, especially my close friends, in that I feel like that leaving a legacy of faith is just part of what we're supposed to do in this world. I'm very inspired by the man that founded Pine Cove, because he literally writes a book about his faith story and why he founded Pine Cove. And I hope that in my writing that I share my faith with people as well. And so when I write that, I definitely want my audience to understand what God means to me and understand how important He is in my life. I do think I think that the thing that turned my life on a dime or changed my faith story would most likely be the fact that I became very, very ill fairly recently in 2010, 2011, and almost died. I went through 185 days in the hospital and surgeries and just a lot of rehabilitation. And I think that what I became aware of was that the hospital was a good place to share my faith. And it wasn't really that hard to do. And I could literally have a captive audience in an operating room where they couldn't leave. And so it was kind of fun in a way to be able to have those opportunities to share your faith with the nurses, with the orderlies, with the person that took care of you, as well as, just talk about Jesus with them. And I think that inspired me in a way to just be more blunt about it and do it in the grocery line, do it other places that I didn't previously really engage people in those ways. Well, again, I think engaging people at a young age and just talking about your faith more openly is probably the one thing I wish I'd have done younger. I would also say that the thing that I would want them to know is that we're all broken pots. We are all fearfully and wonderfully made, and yet we're broken pots. And that may sound like two opposite things, but it really isn't for the Lord. And, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and every day you should embrace that and embrace that you're a child of God. Just like every day you should embrace the fact that you mess up. And, He's going to forgive you, but we still have to strive to live a better life. That's an expectation that when I meet my Maker, I will say, did I do it? So that's the thing that I think you have to think about. There is a season, as we hear in Ecclesiastes, and I do believe that, even at this season of my life, which is older, and, there's still a purpose, and we are driven by that purpose to serve the Lord. And so you have to find what niche you fit into now, rather than, it may not be the niche that you fit in at age 30. So that's important. When I talk about my faith story, it's very important to talk about my husband, because he was our leader in our family in terms of being just a godly man, being very, very in touch with his faith walk with the Lord, the fact that he continued to study and be in men's Bible studies, the fact that he found it very, very important to lead us to be there every Sunday and to be there on time. And he prayed with our family and talked about the Bible, and he was very Socratic in his methods, in that he talked so much about questioning things and questioning, why do you believe this? And I think that's very helpful, especially for baby Christians, to come to the realization of what it is I believe and why do I believe it. And, the Bible tells me so is very important, but where exactly in the Bible is it? And why is that important to you emotionally? And how is that going to help you in your life? And those things that he did were very, very helpful, both for me and for my children. And my son, of course, now is a Lutheran minister. And even as he was going through seminary, my husband continued to do that. And I found that I think it strengthened his faith. I can't speak for him, but that's my thought. And it definitely strengthened my faith. My children look back on their days when I was working in the church, and it's kind of funny because they were considered the designated acolytes, because every Sunday, if there wasn't an acolyte show up, they wound up carrying the cross or lighting the candles. And so, although they have, some silliness about it, the fact that, we could play basketball in the church gym, at the same time, I know that it influenced their lives. It influenced the people that were around them, their friends. And I think that that's very important, that you show your faith. You just exhibit it. I think that it's just like an art show. You show your faith every day, and you become known for that. I have friends of mine that literally call me the church lady, and that is, it's amusing. I'm also called a llama mama because I go to Peru on mission, but I think that those things are things that I'm proud of, and I do hope that they're things that people do remember about me and the legacy that I leave. The time that I was really the most angry about with God was not really my illness, but it was the death of my husband. It was very, very hard to cope, and I call the first 3 years after he died my desert time, because I was so sad that it was hard to even function. And it's funny because I prayed so hard to be out of that, and it was just like one day it just disappeared almost. It was like the cloud had lifted and I had mourned enough. And everybody's different about grief, and that's another thing I would say to people, especially Christians. Don't try to put people in a box about grief. They're going to get over it when they do, and just help them along the way and love them and pray for them. But everybody's different in that respect, and that's the thing that I didn't know until I actually experienced it. And I was probably very insensitive to other people's grief until I actually experienced that. And I think that God does that. He uses the life events in our life to change us so that we can help others. And I think that's important, that we should take those life events, even the painful ones, and use them to help other people. The profession that I chose in conjunction with my faith really was teaching, and so I taught at a discipline alternative school, and I taught the bad boys and girls, and I went into it with the thought that maybe I could change their lives. And in the 7 years I taught, I think I possibly did. The saddest part of it was I lost 7 children to drugs, alcohol, suicide, and other things. And so that was very hard to cope with. But at the same time, there was redemption in that some children actually didn't keep coming back to me and continually mess up. They learned their lesson. And so that was a blessing. And I think that if I had not been having faith, I don't think I would have coped well with that job at all. And I literally had my Bible study pray for kids, and I would just give them the initials because of privacy. I'd say, pray for S, and this is what this person's going through, and they would pray for them, and that really lightened my load because I knew other people were praying for my kids. And then when I transferred into writing, I think it's kind of very much the same thing in that I really like encouraging, especially tutoring writing, people to tell their story and to be authentic and to know the things that really have shaped them. One of those things in many people's lives is God. And so, Jesus does shape our lives every day, 24/7, 365. And, when you tell your story, if you leave that part out, you're leaving out a huge chunk of what really is important to our lives. To be able to see God in those moments, I found that death, the finiteness of death, is very hard to accept when it's a death of a young person. However, at the same time, I also saw the people around them, how in some cases it brought them closer to God. And whether it was the families, the brothers, the sisters, the parents, the grandparents, in their sorrow, they did reach out to the Lord, and again, He drew them close to Him. And so I think that while it was hard, to see that person go. At the same time, you realize that even in some of the funerals that I went to, how it affected their friends and how their friends came to realize that we're not promised so many years. Tomorrow could be their last day. And so if you're not in touch with your feelings about the Lord and you don't know that that is, your final destination is heaven, that, they came to realize the finiteness of if you didn't believe what would happen. So I think that in itself was very, very important. And it changed my faith story, knowing those things. I chose to tell my faith story because I really enjoy sharing my walk with the Lord with other people, just because I think that, we don't really know in depth a lot of times other people. And I think that when you have those opportunities to get down to what I call the core of your being, we should do it. And we should do it happily and joyfully, because these are those moments in our lives that can change other people's lives. When you are able to connect with others, when they see you in vulnerability, when they see, that you're just a real person, that, just a normal, ordinary person. And I think that those moments that we get to see other people in that way are beautiful moments. I know that when I hear other people's faith stories, I see them as beautiful moments. So I just thought it would be fun to do. What I want people to remember about my faith story is, I think, acceptance. We accept people where they are in their walk with the Lord, and we cheer them on from the sidelines, and we hug them, and we embrace them wherever they are, and we pray for them to reach even higher and to know the Lord better, whether it's reading the Bible, whether it's praying, whether it's being in a community of believers, or whether it's inspiring people who don't believe. We want them to reach higher. And I think that if I could say anything about what I want, that is what I want. I would say that the one person that modeled Christ the most to me was my grandmother. And it's a close second, my husband. And the reason I would say that is because she lived a life of not having affluence. She studied the Bible every day. She prayed every day. She was very in touch with His creation and understood, the gift of creation. She also understood her responsibilities as a mother, as a grandmother, as a sister, as a child even, when she was young. She understood what her responsibilities as a Christian were, and she fulfilled them with joy and with happiness and a smile on her face and wonderful encouraging words to other people. She encouraged people with food. She encouraged people, with conversation. She encouraged people with just her modeling of everyday living for the Lord. And I just don't know anybody that even really comes close to that. My husband would be the second person that I would say did, because he did also. And he went through a lot of adversity in his shop, in that there were years we were broken into 13 times in 1 year, and it was very hard for him to see God in that, and yet he did. And so he would be the second person that I would say that about.